Welcome to StudyIQ. My name is Bhuvan Apurvaja, and this is lecture 3 of the Aranya Series, where we are discussing the entire syllabus of Environment and Ecology in the run-up to UPSC 2024. Right? So just before we begin, can you just quickly, those who are watching me live, just let me know if you can hear and see me all right, so that we can get the session started. All right. We have important, concepts to understand. And if you're watching this lecture with the intention of, understanding more about succession and homeostasis, I would suggest that head over to lecture 4 of this entire series, where that will be discussed in detail. All right. Okay. Good morning, Ash. Good evening, Ash J. Deepak. Good evening. All right. Thanks for letting me know, both of you. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So we shall begin then. So on our agenda today is, first we'll understand a deep look at the principles of ecology. Okay. Last class we had finished at the differences between niche, habitat, as well as understanding biomes. There is some doubts that need to be addressed. So we'll quickly go ahead and take a brief look at those doubts, and thereafter we will try and understand in today's class essentially about the whole web of food. How does food travel in an ecosystem, the food chain, the food web, as well as understanding the principles of ecology. Okay, so the difference between adaptation, variation, acclimatization, all of those we will take a brief look at. Okay, Pratik, good evening, welcome guys. Okay, and so that's, but if you're looking at this lecture for understanding this particular topic, head over to lecture 4, where it will be discussed in detail. All right, this is my Telegram channel. You can go ahead and join this. The PDF of this will be shared. Okay, you can go ahead and take a look at the questions, and this is my Instagram ID. All right, so first we'll take a look at the questions of last class, because that is what we intend to do here. We intend to take an outcome-based learning model and not just understanding concepts in isolation. All right, so the first question I had for you is again a question from the previous year's UPSC question that has been asked. Which of the following is the best description of the term ecosystem? First one, a community of organisms interacting with one another. Well, firstly, you have to understand from the exam perspective, it's just talking about the community. Okay, and by now you must know that ecosystem is to do with the particular organism and its relationship with the factors around it. Okay, abiotic as well as biotic. Okay, so this is essentially the definition of community when we have discussed it in the last class itself. Okay, that part of the earth which is inhabited by living organisms is essentially biosphere. Right, you have lithosphere, hydrosphere, then you have the common area between lithosphere and hydrosphere where life exists. That is called as biosphere. A community of organisms together with the environment in which they live, essentially describing ecosystem. Okay, the organism along with the conditions around it. What's the relationship it shares? That's the ecosystem of the organization. Easiest way to remember, there is an ecosystem right on your palm, wherein a specific type of bacteria might grow, might be good for you, might be injurious for you, but that is the ecosystem of that particular bacteria. Similarly, you have, the Sundarban tigers that lives, in a particular ecosystem. Okay, its habitat is the forest of Sundarbans, but it is a part of that mangrove ecosystem that exists there. All right, so this is ecosystem. Okay, and finally, the flora and fauna of a geographical area is essentially biota, which is the life that exists. Okay, the flora plus fauna in a particular area is described as the biota. Okay, is that clear enough, guys? Karuna, good evening. Pranjul, good evening. Right, Ashjay, I hope it was clear. Halesh, Kabilan, good evening. Good evening, guys. Welcome. If you're joining me for the first time, well, this is lecture 3. Go ahead and take a look at lecture 1 and 2. One is where we discussed the macro overview. 2 is where we have started the whole lecture from. This is the third iteration. You haven't missed a lot. Okay. This is again a question from the previous year's questions that came in the year 2012. If tropical rainforest is removed, it does not regenerate quickly. Why does it happen? Well, it happens because of the process of leaching, wherein you have the nutrients of the soil that are washed off because of the incessant rainfall that happens in the equatorial regions. Okay, by now you must know that the equatorial regions sees a lot of continuous rainfall. What happens then? The topsoil is washed off, along with it all the nutrients, which is why you find that growth happens slowly there. Life regenerates, but regenerates slowly. All right. So the soil of the rainforest is deficient in nutrients due to leaching is the answer here. A being the correct answer. In this case, C was the correct answer. All right, let's look forward to the next questions. Which of the above are abiotic factors? Abiotic, which do not have life in them, which do not have anything to do with life. The lifeless factors are abiotic factors. Okay, that might influence a particular organisms, how it survives or thrives in an environment. Okay, so tides, again, you have seen, say, tidal actions do cause, say, particular ecosystems to generate and regenerate, which is correct. Gravitational force, salinity, light. All 1, 2, 3, and 5 are your abiotic factors. Okay, there is no life involved there. But when it comes to the predator-prey relationship, see, there are two living organisms that you're talking about. There is life involved there, which means this becomes a biotic factor. The rest, abiotic factor. These are natural processes that influence a particular organism in an environment. Clear? Okay. Abhiraj, welcome, welcome. All right, okay. So the answer here being 1, 2, 3, and 5. Let's go forward. Which of the above are limiting factors? What are limiting factors? That put a constraint on the growth of a population. Okay, which is why you find that, say, certain organisms, even though they exist in the millions, do not overwhelm the, say, the minority of the species. Okay, because there are limiting factors that influence the growth and the spread of a particular species. Right? So what are the limiting factors? Well, all of them in this case. Okay, all of these are natural limiting factors that will influence terrestrial autotrophs, autotrophs being those that make their own food. Okay, so you're looking at autotrophs that essentially comprise, say, plants. All right, what are the other autotrophs, guys? We have discussed it in the last class. Can someone let me know? What are the other autotrophs? You have plants, you have, say, cyanobacteria that creates its own food. All right. You're also looking at certain types of algae that create their own food. Right. So these are influenced by these particular limiting factors. Next, the descending manner. Go from the biggest to the smallest. All right. Biggest being biosphere, thereafter biome. Thereafter, what comes next, guys? Can someone tell me? Does this come? Yes, 6, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. Is that the correct particular relationship that I've drawn? The biggest being biosphere, then biome, thereafter ecosystem. 5, thereafter community, population, organism. Organism being the individual. All right. This is the individual. This is the biosphere. Eventually, if you were to just go ahead and, say, extrapolate this, okay, if you were to go ahead and extrapolate it and, say, figure out the end to end, okay, so just quickly let's look at it logically. So you have the individual that is made up of, say, tissues. All right, now these tissues are made up of cells. These cells are eventually made up of what? Eventually are going down to the atom level. Are you not? Eventually that's what we're all made up of. And finally, when you go ahead of the biosphere, you come to, say, the earth, right? Then that goes ahead and becomes a part of, say, the solar system, the Milky Way. Do you realize? So this particular is what we are discussing. This is what the focus of our attention is. If you want to go ahead and look at the end to end of life, right from, say, an atom level up until as a part of the larger universe. Okay. But our study is related to, see, the distinction right from, say, individual up until biosphere. Clear? Gudupi, Govind, right now, no such plans to start geography. We are going to focus first on finishing ecology and environment. Thereafter, we'll start another series on CSAT. That will be, say, sometime around September end. Up until then, I want to complete a sizable portion of this first. Okay? Hope that clears. Right? Okay, let's go forward. Sorry, this will be, oh, did I mistake it? Did I create a mistake here? This will be 1 and 2, yeah. All right. Biosphere, biome, ecosystem. Okay. Then community, population, and organism. That's the correct method here. All right, let's look at this. Limiting factors are mostly abiotic, obviously, but there are biotic limiting factors also. Okay, don't get confused by saying that limiting factors are exclusively abiotic. No, there are biotic, there are life events that will be constrained on the growth of a population. Say prey-predator relationship. Okay, that is a biotic limiting factor that will put a constraint on the growth of a particular species. All right, so but we understand that yes, most of them are obviously abiotic in nature. Say climate, say altitude, say salinity. All of these are abiotic limiting factors. Clear? So this is again correct, by the way. Density dependent limiting factors include predation and competition. Now what are density dependent limiting factors? Those factors which will directly influence the population regardless of everything else. Okay, so the prey predator relationship, see how it directly influences population, whereas the density independent factors are the ones, say, the natural events that occur around you. Okay, that regardless of the population that exists, it's all going to be obliterated, all going to be threatened, right? So both are correct here. Okay, so the incorrect statements, none of the above. All right, let's go forward. Now this is again a question from the PYQ. Please understand what a virus is first. Viruses are dormant organisms. What does a dormant organism mean? That it stays in dormancy, but it needs a host to go ahead and activate itself. In our case, you find that the virus lodges in our DNA and gets activated and then transmits whatever disease it has to transmit. Right? The rest, fungi and bacteria, are a part of the decomposer family. All right. Now we have obviously taken a look at, say, what decomposers are, but please understand that viruses are not decomposers. All right. They are essentially, they plant themselves to the host, probably most likely in the DNA, and then they transmit the disease. They do not decompose the particular organism. All right. So the decomposers here are just fungi and bacteria, which is B. Right? Energy flow from primary producers, autotrophs, to subsequent levels is unidirectional. We have seen this particular slide in the last class where we saw how autotrophs create food, and thereafter that food, that energy goes right up till, say, the tertiary consumer. Okay, this whole process of, say, creation of energy by the autotrophs up until it goes to the tertiary consumer. Okay, it follows the two laws of thermodynamics also. Right? That obviously, first law, that energy is not created or dissipated, it just changes form from one form to the another. And number two, that there will be some sort of loss of heat energy. During this process, you find that some sort of heat energy is also dissipated. Okay, so this energy flow that happens is obviously based on these two principles, which we have discussed extensively in the last class. Autotrophs comprise all these three particular stakeholders. The incorrect statements here being none again. Okay, I hope I'm clear. I hope I'm clear. Correct, absolutely, Pratik. Salik Anwar, good evening. Good evening. Okay? All right, let's go forward. Which of the following are detritivores? Basically, the decomposers. Okay, look at how many times UPSC has asked about this. Okay, which is why you find that the first, say, 5, 6, 10 chapters of your book, the StudyIQ book, you will find that a lot of questions are getting or have been asked previously directly from that initial 5, 6 pages. Okay, very, very important that a student spends enough time understanding these different concepts, because even in today's class you will see how UPSC goes ahead and asks questions from random sentences. Okay, we'll take a look at that. So which of the following are detritivores, the decomposers? Please understand, jellyfish and seahorses are not decomposers. In fact, they do belong to the marine ecosystem, but nowhere close to the role that decomposers play. Okay, straight away, earthworms, you know, do this act. Millipedes and woodlice are my decomposers here. 1, 3 and 5. C being the answer. All right, so these are my star individuals. Individuals who went ahead and answered these questions correctly and took the time and effort to answer those in the comment box. To the rest, please go ahead. I have a bunch of questions for you. I would expect you to answer them in the comment box. We will take a look at those in the fourth lecture of this Aranya series. All right. So Pranjul, Prateek, Shubhankar, Shubham, Swapni, Karuna, Mandeep, Pooja and Tanu, thank you for your participation. Do keep up the good work. Alright, so first now let's understand. Last class we had some doubt regarding niche versus biomes, okay, and niche versus habitat. So let's first take a brief look at niche versus habitat. Okay, niche versus habitat. We'll quickly take a look at that, revise it in 2 minutes and then move forward in the class. Alright, so let's consider this tree now. Okay, here is this tree for you. Now, suppose if you were to divide this tree in 3 levels, okay, the top, the middle, and the lower part of the tree, right? Now, you are going to find, say, species A or a particular species of bird, say species A, in the mid part, species B, and in the lower part, species C. Now, what happens? This particular bird only goes ahead and, say, resides here and sources its nutrition from that particular area, the top part of the tree. Okay. Another species of bird does the same role but with the middle part of the tree. And then another one, the third one comes and say does it for the lower part of the tree. Okay. Now if this is the case study I've put before you, what does niche indicate? That the niche of A is this upper part of the tree. Like I've told you, niche has 2 particular roles, and you will remember this because that is how the UPSC examination will question you. Okay, niche is to do with 2 things. 1, the location, and number 2, the role. Right? What is the role that it plays and what is its contribution to that particular area? That is niche. For example, in English we say that, say, a particular say Sachin Tendulkar's niche is batting, which means what? His function in the particular team, he is the batter. That's his role. That's his location. You understand that? Okay. Pratik will discuss the thermodynamics law. Aaj abhi karenge wo. We'll do that. Okay. So that is the niche you're talking about. So the niche of A becomes the top part of the tree. That's where it functions. That's where it resides. Similarly, B, the middle part of the tree. C, the last part of the tree. Now, the same time, the habitat of all these 3 birds is this tree. The physical location of the bird, okay, that is the habitat. The location plus the role that it has in, say, a certain part of the habitat is niche. What does that tell you? That in a particular habitat, all right, you can have several niches. All right. Several niches can exist in a particular habitat. However, no particular habitat will have 2 living beings that will consider the particular area as their habitat, which means no 2 species can have the same habitat or the same, say, niche. Okay, not habitat, in fact, niche. Okay, that they cannot play the similar role in a similar habitat. If they end up playing a similar role, only 2 relationships can exist between them. 1, predation. That one will go ahead, say bird A will go ahead and kill bird A or bird C. Reduce the competition for the resources. Okay. And number 2 obviously will be competition will come up. You are going to have this animosity develop if 2 particular individuals or 2 particular organisms have a similar niche in a habitat. Understand it that way, that the role has to be completely independent. The moment 2 individuals with the same role come up, either predation or competition, possibly both. Okay, so that is niche versus habitat. Now niche can have, say, several connotations. You will find, say, reproductive niche and functional niche. All of that are again to do with, say, subsequent subcategories, but the eventual macro overview remains the same. Okay, that no 2 organisms can have the same niche in a habitat. All right, we'll go forward now and we'll take a look now at biomes. Okay, this is where we had ended the last class. We'll just quickly go over it. Now, like I told you, we started from niche, we have come to habitat. Now, the larger explanation of everything else that is happening around it, the whole organisms, the abiotic, the biotic factors, all of that eventually have consequences. And so what eventually you and I have done, the human beings have done is, on the basis of vegetation, which is determined by climate, you have gone ahead and subcategorized all of this. Okay, this is what you have done. On the basis of vegetation, which is determined by climate, okay, you have gone ahead and created a subcategory to explain all of this that is happening. Okay, so let's understand this now. What unites all biomes is that biomes can be differentiated by the organisms residing as well as the fact that the organisms share adaptations. So you have vegetation, you have animal life, both of this exist in a biome, and what you find is that these two particular, say, living organisms, now they have adaptations. Now what are adaptations? Okay, we'll quickly understand what is an adaptation. Okay, fine. So adaptation, now let's understand what is an adaptation. Okay, let's look at this. Okay. Essentially, the changes that you need to make, or an organism needs to make, changes that an organism needs to make, okay, to ensure survivability. Now, you will understand this in 2 sentences very quickly. Okay. That the changes it needs to develop within itself to ensure that it survives, because I've told you in the second class that the point of life is to thrive, is to survive. For that, nature will provide it with every opportunity to survive. Okay. And how does nature do that? You see, for example, in, say, desert areas, okay, what you find? That the plants have, say, thorny outgrowth. Is it not? Or they have, say, waxy leaves. Okay, the development of waxy leaves or no leaves, okay, that a plant might exist, but it may not have no leaves. It may not have no leaves at all, right? These are adaptations. Why is the plant doing this in the desert area? To reduce water consumption. Is it not? To make sure that it survives and thrives, that it is adapting to the environment around it. To consider the, say, animal example, okay. Why do giraffes have long necks? Okay. Why is it? First, you have to understand that the kind of grassland that they live in, the kind of environment that they live in, that their trees come at a height. Okay. The foliage that they want to eat comes at a height. They need that particular height to go ahead and eat it. Long necks. Okay. That you find, say, certain, again, animals in desert ecosystem. Okay. They will go ahead and pass concentrated urine. Okay. Why is that happening? To minimize water loss from their body so that they are able to sustain themselves. All of these are examples of adaptation. And you find adaptations as a major part of biomes. Okay. That this big vegetational area determined by climate, which has both plant and animal life, you will find certain adaptations having taken place. So, for example, you will find, say, in the colder areas, tundra taiga areas, okay, you will find that the trees will be shaped something like this. Why is that? Have you ever thought of it? Why is that the trees are shaped like, say, a pyramid structure? Because when the snow comes, okay, you don't want it to settle on the leaves. You want it to be sliding down from all sides. That the foliage should be equally cleared. Okay. All of these are what? These are adaptations that the plant life has got within itself to make sure it survives in that particular climate. Clear? Okay. Arka, good evening. Welcome guys. Okay. So this is what adaptation is. Now at the same time, there is another term that you should know, which is called acclimatization. Okay. Acclimatization. I hope my spelling is correct. If it's incorrect, do forgive me. Okay. Just understand it in a simple manner. Today, if you are in New Delhi, okay, And if you have to go to say Leh tomorrow morning, all right, and if you are hoping to say go visit the Pangong So, suppose if you are going to visit the Pangong So, you want to go have a look. Okay, you take the early morning flight to go to Leh. Straight away you will find after you land there, your local host or your person who is looking after you, your hosting you, the hotel manager also, they will say, sir, stay back for at least 12 hours. Wait, acclimatize yourself and then proceed towards that particular journey that you want to go to. What is happening here? Eventually the rate of respiration is getting higher because air is thinner, right? So you give yourself your time to acclimatize. Your body should be able to adjust to the new environment that you have landed yourself into. You must have heard, no? Since the 1962 war, okay, that Indian soldiers, they were posted in say somewhere in central India, okay, overnight posted to say Jammu and Kashmir. Third day they are fighting against the Chinese. Do you think they were acclimatized enough to go ahead and have engage in high altitude warfare? No. Acclimatization is necessary so as to bring about efficiency. Okay, that is the point of acclimatization. Clear? Am I clear, guys? Okay? Okay? So what is acclimatization? Straight away you understand. The small changes that you need to make in a small period of time. Small changes in a small period to survive in an environment. Right? You see this? That you are going to Leh Ladakh. Eventually, you need quickly to make that change in a short amount of time so as to make that trip to Pangong So go visit for your Instagram. Do you understand? That is acclimatization. Okay. Then you have say others, variation, extinction, evolution, the similar terms. Okay. Not a lot of explaining to do there. But what's the theory? That all of this is happening in the biomes. This place that is determined by vegetation, which is determined by climate, all of these processes are a fundamental part of ecosystems of biomes. Okay, because eventually biomes is created of several ecosystems. Clear? We have seen that descending order. All right. So all of these processes are happening. Now let's go forward. So what is the major factor? Climate, which is a major factor in determining the type of life that resists. Climate again determined by say several factors, altitude, sunlight, the different NCRT level, numbers, etc., you will go figure it out. What are the factors that influence climate? All of them together are going to influence the biomes, the type of plant and animal vegetation, plant vegetation and animal life that will come up. Okay. Now the term biome you must know the names. Okay. So for example, we had what was the person? Ecosystem was by which person, guys? We discussed in the last class. Ernest. What was the second name of the guy? The surname of the guy, you let me know. Okay. Now, there is no universal consensus on a constitution of biome. Please understand this. Most scientists would tell you that biome is to do with, say, the animal life, the plant life. But the New Age scientists are of the opinion that a biome cannot be defined until and unless you include human beings into it. That the anthropological angle has to be included when you are defining biomes. Because once again, what you know is that say the anthropological intervention is so high that you are looking at say the 6th extinction event that has been spoken about. Okay, we'll discuss extinction event in this series, and this has been asked by the UPSC previously, by the way. What is the 6th extinction event? That our interference with the Earth's natural process is so much that eventually we are going to annihilate everything. Okay, that is the 6th extinction event. Clear? So again, the distinction of biome say between human activity, whether it should be included or not, is still a matter of consensus. So know about this. Clear? Ernest Haeckel, correct. Bulbul, good evening. Good evening. Welcome, guys. Correct, Karuna. You are clear about the desert mouse, the concentrated urine. Correct. Bahut badhiya. Okay. Now let's look at ecotone. I hope biomes was clear. Okay. You have seen say the different sites of biomes here. Have a look at this. You'll be able to identify each one of them. So you look at savanna or you look at tropical rainforests. Each of them will have their own adaptations, guys. Say for example, in a mangrove, okay, in a mangrove, you are going to find, say, the presence of pneumatophores, right, which allows, say, the particular mangroves to go ahead and breathe, respiration. What is that? It is an adaptation provided for that particular place. Okay. Then you are also looking at, say, the other adaptations that I told you. Say, inverted tree structure to make sure that the snow goes off quickly. Okay. All of these. Canopy. Where do you find canopy the most? Huh? Tell me, in which particular biome would you expect to find a huge canopy? Which will essentially give rise to what? The limiting factor of sunlight here. Okay, sunlight will become a limiting factor because all of these other organisms, plants trying to grow here, they are going to be hindered because of the presence of this huge canopy right over them. Where would you expect to find canopy, guys? Bataiye mujhe. Which place would you find, say, trees with huge canopy, which will essentially have this particular limiting factor? Okay, so you'll find, say, each of these, no guys, each of these will have particular animals and plants that will have particular adaptations that will help them specialize and survive in that particular biome. Rainforest, correct. Tropical rainforest is where you find the huge canopies. Okay, so again, the animals there, they develop adaptations. Okay, that there are, say, shade resistant plants that develop. Okay, so all of that is what? A part of how animals and plants are adapting to survive in a tropical rainforest. Is that clear, guys? Okay. Let's go forward now. Ecotone and ecocline, very, very easy concept. Okay, understand it, say, with the Sundarban example. The best example to understand ecotone and ecocline. Okay. So you know that Sundarban, say, exists between, say, suppose a terrestrial area, and then you have, say, the Bay of Bengal on the other side. Marine ecosystem. Now, what happens in Sundarbans, I'll tell you. It has the best of the both worlds. Okay. It is firstly an area of immense productivity, which is why you find, say, think from the policy perspective. How is it that, say, villagers are able to sustain themselves in Sundarbans? That they are able to, say, harness the forest, and you are hearing of these self-help groups that the forest department forms. So what are the self-help groups doing? Are they just looking at the tiger? No. They are using the forest for their own benefit, for local community benefit. How are they able to do so? Because the forest has so much to offer. How does the forest have so much to offer when it has no particular resource around it? Well, because it is an area of ecotone. Okay, that it has both the best of the terrestrial ecosystem as well as the marine ecosystem that exists there. Okay, so an area that acts as a transition or a boundary between two ecosystems. Sundarban, the boundary between marine and terrestrial. Okay, that the ecotones are created due to abrupt changes. Okay, and so now what you're going to find? The different types of ecotones that exist. Okay, the two things that you need to remember: ecotones are areas of high productivity. Now, what do I mean by productivity? That in terms of the resources, the biomass that exists within the forest, okay, that ecological efficiency when you talk about, okay, that will be very high there. Okay, are you clear? We'll discuss what ecological efficiency is. We have discussed the 10% rule, no? That energy loss happens. What happened here? Okay, one sec. Okay, we are back online, thank God. So what was I discussing? I completely went off track. Okay, so the high productivity that we are discussing, no? So in terms of, say, the biomass that exists, okay, this particular area, this transitional area, it will be higher than the biomass of this and this. That you will also find certain species in this particular area. okay, which will be particular to that particular transitional area. What are those species called? Edge species, okay, which you will not find, say, in A or in B, but you will find it in this area C, okay. Adaptations will be found in this particular area. Pneumatophores, you will not find it in, say, the marine ecosystem. You will not find it in the terrestrial ecosystem. You will only find it in the mangroves ecosystem, okay. So this is what ecotones are. Area of immense productivity, a transitional area between two ecosystems that has a particular species or animal or plants with particular adaptations, okay, and those particular animals are called the edge species, okay. Let's go forward and understand ecocline now. So please understand, ecotone is essentially a man-made concept, all right. Nature does not follow this, say, exactly like how I am explaining it to you. It does not happen like that. What happens in nature? That there is, say, no particular line that will demarcate that, okay, the Sundarbans has started and the marine ecosystem ends now. No, that's not how it happens there. So what happens? There it is gradual. For the purpose of our understanding, we understand ecotone like I told you. But in nature, this whole transition happens gradually. This merging and demerging happens gradually. That is called ecocline. Okay. So the zone of gradual but continuous change between two ecosystems, this is a natural concept. This is how it functions on the ground. Whereas ecotone is a man-made concept which we use to compartmentalize different say, ecosystems. Is that clear, guys? Okay. So there is no sharp boundary here in terms of species composition based on the variation of abiotic factors. Look at this. So as you go up higher in the mountain, what do you find? That because of, say, altitude variation, so you have temperature variation, you have, say, rainfall variation, all of that is causing what? The different types of plants that grow there. So the ecocline, that particular gradual change happening is ecocline. Correct? Okay, clear? Fine. So I've told you about edge effect and edge species. So clear this. So this is, suppose, your terrestrial ecosystem, or if you're looking at it as a grassland ecosystem, this is a forest ecosystem. Okay. This area where they are going to eventually merge, this area of common subset of both the ecosystems. Okay. Mutually inclusive subsets, you call them, no, in maths. That is what? The species that exist there are the edge species, which are found exclusively in ecotone areas. Clear? That's how you're going to remember it. Refers to the changes in population along the boundary of two habitats. Species from both habitats are found here, and these are called the edge species. Please remember that edge species are a direct property of ecotones. Okay. If you are talking about edge species, it means you are talking about ecotones. Edge species always exist in ecotones. Okay, that's how UPSC will test you. We'll discuss how it has done so in the past. A question I'll put forward before you today. Okay. Now look at this. We discussed this in the last class, guys. We'll just quickly go through it. Okay. The question on thermodynamics. So the first law of thermodynamics. What does it say? That energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only change form. Go from one form to the other. Transfer from one form to the other. Right? And what does the second law say? That there will be heat loss. That there is no particular 100% efficiency. Right? 100% efficiency is a misnomer. That does not happen. Okay. Because to create this process, energy is needed, and so for that there will be heat loss. Now please understand this that we discussed in the last class. You have these sunlight that gives energy in form of, say, the carbon CO2 that I had discussed. The carbon dioxide, using that bonds, the carbon bonds that are there in the open atmosphere, fixing that carbon, that is called, we discussed this carbon fixing. Okay, a whole class on this is coming up next, where we discuss how, say, plants go ahead and fix carbon. Okay, or how plants go ahead and fix nitrogen. Nitrogen fixing we have learnt about. Okay, so we'll discuss that. But eventually what you understand, that these autotrophs go ahead and fix carbon from the atmosphere, create these carbon dioxide bonds within themselves, okay, which eventually is say eaten by the primary consumers. 10% is only carried forward. You must know it by now. So that 10%, eventually what happens? Say if you have say 100 joules of energy here, okay, in the autotroph, what you're looking at the primary consumer getting? 10% of it, which means only 10. Okay, if this is just 100 joules here, the primary autotroph gets only 10%, which means 10 joules. Okay, the secondary one gets how much? 0.1 joules. Do you realize? So eventually, by the time you enter in the tertiary consumer phase, the guy is getting not a lot of the energy. Most of it is getting lost where? In terms of the individual processes that govern these actions. They are also using energy to drive that process forward, no? Okay, so I just wanted to quickly revisit this because the questions are arising out of this today. Okay, this relationship that goes from say the autotrophs up until the tertiary consumers. Okay, 2-3 things that you need to note about them. One, this whole flow is unidirectional. You see, is it not? This flow is happening this way. Have a look at this. This flow from say the sun to the autotroph to the first consumer, the second consumer, the tertiary consumer, eventually going to the decomposers, okay, is all unidirectional. This is unidirectional flow of say energy that is happening. All right. Eventually what happens though? The decomposers go ahead and say they have complex microorganisms. This dead matter that comes out of say all of these events, all of these entities, eventually after the decomposer, the detritivores have gone ahead and decomposed it, okay, they are broken down into complex microorganisms and eventually you find them entering again through the autotrophs in presence of say sunlight and water, the process of photosynthesis. Correct. So this is what is happening. This unidirectional flow is actually cyclical if you consider the process of decomposers. But the energy flow is unidirectional. It is going from autotrophs up until the tertiary consumers. Okay. Now why is this important to understand? Because these are the facts that you need to understand from the exam perspective. Okay. Number one, organisms at each trophic level depend on those of the lower trophic level for the energy demands. Look at this. This person, the secondary consumer, in fact the primary consumer, unless and until the plant goes and makes food, you are not looking at this one getting any food. So direct relationship. Unless and until A does their work, B gets no food. B does their work, only C gets food. Okay. So it's again unidirectional and an interrelationship is formed at each trophy, which is the each trophic level, the chain, the level of food that exists. Who is the consumer? Who is the tertiary consumer? Who is the primary producer? That determines trophy or the trophic level. Okay. You're also looking at next one. Look at this. When any organism dies, it is converted to biomass that serves as energy source for decomposers. Okay. This decomposers going to the primary autotrophs and then to the primary consumers, the secondary consumers and the tertiary consumers. Eventually all of them feeding the decomposers. Clear? And now last is the standing crop. What is the standing crop? Last one we had discussed in the last class. We had discussed specifically limiting factors and we discussed carrying capacity. So if these are new terms for you, I suggest go ahead and take a look at that. Okay. Similar term is a standing crop. What does it say? That each trophic level has a certain mass of living matter at a particular time, which is called the standing crop. The total living mass is the standing crop. Okay. Measured as the mass of living biomass of the number in a unit area. Okay, absolutely simple. Standing crop is the number of living organisms, plants and animals that exist within a particular area. Okay, the actual number is what you're looking at, the biomass. Okay, all right, let's go forward and now understand food chain. Now that you've understood this relationship now guys, how energy goes ahead from say the primary autotrophs up until this fellow. the tertiary consumer. Now what you need to understand is food chain and food web. Okay. What is food chain? This unidirectional relationship that all of these share. Okay. That is food chain. That is food chain. And what is food web? These organisms are a part of a larger system. These are not the only organisms that they are there. There are other organisms also. Each is again either preying on the other one or is in competition with the other one. Right? So that is food web. Okay. Food chain, unidirectional, linear. Food web, multidirectional. Again, it's a complex process that happens there. That is all. One line you will understand it in. Let's look at food chain now. See the sequence of transfer of matter and energy from the autotrophs up until the tertiary consumer. That is your food chain. Okay. For example, in your life, okay, if you are say right now preparing for the civil services, and if you are again, if you have taken a drop, if you're not doing it say alongside your college graduation or job or studies or say any other engagement, if you are just only preparing for UPSC, you will find that in your house, you will be at the bottom of the food chain, right? That you will be completely isolated from everything else. You'll be like, go ahead. Your family will like, go ahead, study. Do you realize? Eventually, if you are not very successful, you will also have to hear barbs from the others in and around your family. Why is that? Because you are lowest in the food chain. Do you realize? So that is what food chain is. Your importance is determined by your position in the food chain. Say in the process, in the example that I'm giving you, say your father or your mother, the head of the family, the top of the food chain. Do you realize? That is how nature functions also. Okay. So you have say particular organisms that occupy the level of your father in the family or your mother in the family. They are called as say the apex predators. Okay. That there is no one above them in the particular chain that I'm talking about. Okay. Equivalent to your father or mother. You are right now suppose like a phytoplankton. Okay. Ekdam basic wale ho tum abhi. Single celled organism you are right now. Okay. You are in the process of becoming an apex predator. That is what food chain and food web is. Understand it that way. Okay. So it describes who eats whom in the wild. Simple. Alright. Now there is a lack of sunlight penetration in the deep sea hydrothermal ecosystem. So the organisms rely on chemical deposits and hydrothermal fluids. Most of the food chain is driven by the sunlight, the sun energy, the solar energy. However, deep inside the oceans, you also find geothermal energy being harnessed. Okay. All of that essentially determine the food chain of that particular area. Okay. Now understand the differences. There are two types you're looking at, the grazing food chain, the detritus food chain. Detritus from the decomposers, the dead bodies. Okay. Here the source of energy obviously will be organic matter. The dead tissues, fat, bones, structure of the whole or the plant, vascular plant, whatever is there, eventually it is decomposed by the detritivores. Okay. The fungi and bacterial action will go ahead and break it down into simpler organisms, which will essentially be consumed by the plants essentially. Okay. Which is why you say that eventually you get recycled into nature. You know, life eventually gets recycled into nature. You might die, but then eventually you are a part of this very nature. You are just circulating in the system. And how do you circulate? Two ways. One is the detritus food chain, where you are a part of the dead organic matter. And here the first trophic level is occupied by the decomposers. Bacteria and fungal action will go ahead and break it down. Here the number of trophic levels is low. Why? Because here is the decomposer that breaks down your tissue or the plant's tissue, plant's vascular tissues into simple organisms. Okay, simple organisms it breaks down, and then that is composed and taken up by the autotrophs. So you see how many trophic levels are here then? Just 1 and 2. 2 trophic levels and you're back in the autotroph system. Whereas in the grazing food chain, you have primary autotrophs eaten by the deer eaten by the say fox eaten by the tiger and all of that. Long number of food chains happening. Okay. Understand it that way, simple. Who eats whom? That is it. How many people are eating each other? Nature again, competition, survival both. Okay. So that is it. In grazing food chain where you have say a grassland ecosystem, okay, that it starts from say a rabbit eaten by a fox and then it goes up till the apex predator, the father or mother of the whole particular ecosystem. So more number of trophic levels. Whereas in decomposers, poor fellows, what did they do? They'll decompose, break it down into single-celled organisms or say complex organisms, which are thereby absorbed by the autotrophs. Done. Clear? That is what the whole theory is. And finally, we take a look at food web now. So the interconnection of food chains. You know, this relationship from autotrophs to say tertiary consumers. This is a unidirectional flow that I'm telling you. But at the same time, within that particular ecosystem, there will be so many other organisms, no, that will be coexisting. So all of that taken together and the relationship that they share within each other. Who is eating whom? Because nature is again not very simple, no. You have a predator that will feast on say several. So a leopard can go ahead and eat a rabbit also. It can eat a deer also. Now rabbit and deer, though are herbivores, may be different parts of the food chain. May again definitely have different niches even though they have the same habitat. Alright, so that is what food web is. Alright, so we'll just take a look at this. Simple theory, not a lot of difficulty that you should encounter here. Alright, so this is again our whole theory explained in one particular photo. Okay, you are looking at the producer side food web, the autotrophs, and you're looking at the decomposer food web, are detritivores. Both of them have separate types of activities that happen here. Obviously, you know by now that the decomposers, the trophic levels will be lower. Okay, they will have lower trophic levels. Whereas when it comes to the producer side, the trophic levels will be higher because there are more stakeholders here. You look at it. So many people eating each other, feeding off each other, enjoying each other's company. Okay, so that is what essentially food web is. You have one side that is dominated by the autotrophs, one side that is dominated by the detritivores. Clear? Okay, have a look at this, not very difficult. Now let's understand ecological efficiency. Okay, all of this I've told you. Eventually you understand that the sunlight is critical to this. Yes, sunlight is essentially the one that is helping me break this carbon dioxide. Autotrophs are using sunlight to harness carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, fix carbon, and then bring it in a form in which, say, it can create food for the primary consumer. Is it not what it is happening? That is what is happening, no? The autotrophs, the plants are able to fix carbon from the atmosphere and create energy and say nutrition for the next in line, the primary consumer. So this is essentially the focus of something called ecological efficiency. Okay, the ratio between the amount of energy acquired from the lower trophic level and the amount of energy transferred to the higher trophic level. For example, if you are a primary consumer, okay, you get your food from the autotroph and you pass along to the secondary consumer. Okay, you know by now that this whole process is governed by the 10% rule, which means only 10% of the total energy is transferred forward. Correct? Now what happens here? This process, okay, in this process, the primary consumer is also using energy for say creating food, for say creating tissues in its body, for say running around. It passes some energy as feces, which is again taken by the decomposers. So what is ecological efficiency? If it gets say 100 joules of energy, eventually they're following the 10% rule and say using its own, it passes forward say 8 joules of energy. Okay, this is your ecological efficiency. The amount of energy you get and the amount of energy you pass forward to the next one in line. Okay, so look at this. The gross primary productivity and net primary productivity are the only two methods in which you go ahead and calculate this. So the total biomass generated is the gross primary productivity, and what is left over after the primary producer has used the energy needs for respiration, creating tissues, all of that is the net primary productivity. Like gross tax and net tax. थोड़ा अपना काटोगे वापस दोगे वो net बन गया. Clear? So this is again an ecological efficiency. Please understand now where UPSC asked this. In terms of say ecosystems, what you're looking at is tropical rainforests. Highly ecologically efficient. Okay. Mangroves, extremely ecologically efficient. Okay. So I'll share this list. Okay. That particular list of, say, descending order. Which is the most ecologically efficient area? Which is the least ecologically efficient area? Where does this energy transfer is inefficient? Where is this biomass not getting transferred to the level that we would expect or want? Okay, I'll share that with you in my Telegram channel. Meanwhile, understand this way. Okay, tropical rainforests and coral reefs are the most ecologically efficient areas that you will find. Okay, primary among them. Why? Because again, you'll find that, say, the coral reefs, the estuaries, they belong to the area now that we understand it as the ecotone area. Okay. Because they are ecotones, I told you the productivity of the area is very high. Mangroves, extremely high productivity. How does Government of India run so many programs there? Because the forest has so much potential. The ecological efficiency of that particular forest is extremely good. Okay. So this is the whole list that you'll remember. Go through it, and I would suggest that make sure that you know this figure. Okay. Now this might seem like a very obsolete, simple figure to you, but when you look at the questions, you're going to be able to solve questions just looking at this figure. Okay. Let's go forward and let's take a look at these questions now, guys. So what you're going to do is you're going to leave these answers for me as you always do. I have questions from, say, A to F or G or some number I have today. You will leave all the answers for me in a tabular format, and we'll discuss the correct answers in the 4th lecture of the Aranya series. Okay. Now let's understand. Small changes that take place with an organism to overcome surrounding problems is called acclimatization. We discussed what is acclimatization today. You will let me know correct or incorrect. Gradual changes that take place with an organism to survive in an environment is called adaptation. Features, habits that help an organism survive in an environment is called evolution. Okay. The minor differences you need to know. The basics first. Let's understand the basics, the rest shall follow. Okay. So you'll identify the incorrect statements here. Next. Okay. Straightforward question. Who is responsible for coining those particular terms? Just make sure that you know the names. Okay. Especially given that UPSC has asked a lot of questions just from the very basics, I would suggest have an idea. Alright, for sure. And then again, we are discussing about adaptations here. This is the whole concept of adaptations that I explained to you. You will go ahead and let me know this answer also. Sloping branches, where do you find them? Waxy stem, thick leaves, where would you find them? Canopy, where would you find them? Deep roots, where would you find them? Finally, number D. A well-developed ecotone comprises some distinct organisms that are not found in adjoining communities. Okay, correct or incorrect? Question, statement 2. An ecotone has greater productivity than natural ecosystems. Statement 3. Edge species are found exclusively in ecotone areas. Identify the correct statements. Okay, you will leave this answer for me too. And let's look at UPSC PYQs. The best way to understand this particular section that we are doing. Okay, this is a PYQ, I believe, from the 2012. I'm not sure, 2012 or 14, either of those years. Okay, which of the following is the correct sequence of a food chain? Okay, what are crustaceans, herrings, and diatoms? Crustaceans, you know, are arthropods. Say crabs. Crustaceans. Herrings are fishes. Okay. Diatoms are, say, the most basic form of life that exist in the ocean. Okay. So how does evolution happen? Go ahead and answer me this. We have discussed this today. Okay. They are the most basic form again, diatoms. So how would life have evolved? Which would have come first? Wo socho. First, the basic would have come. Thereafter, you would have, say, a little evolved. Finally, the fully evolved version of the marine life would have come. Clear? And consider the following types of organisms: copepods, cyanobacteria, diatoms, and foraminifera. Which of the above are primary producers of food chain in the oceans? If you just know who are the autotrophs, which we have discussed several times in this series, who are the autotrophs, you know the answer to this. Okay, thanks Bulbul for joining. I hope you answer the questions. Clear? Next, which of the following is the correct sequence of ecosystems in the order of decreasing productivity, which is essentially what we discussed today, the ecological efficiency. Okay. Who is more productive? All right. That whole figure that I had just shared with you, have a look. Okay. All of these questions you are going to be able to be solve them aram se. Okay, you see how many questions are coming just out of the mere concepts that we have discussed. We have not even started with the actual environment yet. I'm just discussing, say, the basics. And you are looking at a host of at least 20 questions we have discussed. Close to 10 of them have been PYQs. You see how important this becomes. Okay. Again, another question. See, this will not end. UPSC loves food chain, food web. Look at this. With reference to the food chains and ecosystem, consider the following statements. Number 1, a food chain illustrates the order in which a chain of organisms feed upon each other. Food chain are found within the population of a species. Food chain illustrates the number of each organism which are eaten by others. See, the obvious answer to you now. You will straight away understand the obvious answer. Which of the above are correct? Think about this. Okay, it's talking about the number. Does it show the number? Just think about this. The answer is yours. All right. Okay. Now we come to the last part of this lecture, but I think what we are going to do is we are going to leave it here. Okay. What we are going to do is in the next class, I want to start with these two concepts first. First, we'll discuss homeostasis, succession, and eventually we'll discuss pyramids. Okay. This is going to be the agenda of lecture 4, and I would like to begin the class with this place here. You know, the positive interactions and the negative interactions. So, say commensalism, mutualism, all of these again has been asked extensively by the UPSC. So, we'll start our 4th lecture from this particular point. Up until now, I would expect you to go ahead and answer all the questions that I have put forth before you. Please do that. You will see it will solidify your understanding of whatever we have discussed over the course of the last, say, an hour or so. Okay. And if you want to go ahead and access the particular PDF of this lecture, you join me on my Telegram channel. I'll be sharing this in the morning. And also join me tomorrow morning 8 a.m. for the editorial edge. Okay. It's a daily news analysis, 1 hour topical approach to understanding topics. Okay. Go ahead and join me for this. It will be incredibly helpful for you. Okay. Again, a question-based analysis that we do there. Question-based understanding. Okay. So go ahead and join me for this. And I shall expect to see your answers and also hope to see many of you join me in the 4th lecture of this Aranya series, where we will start from, say, the different interactions, the positive, the negative interactions that take place, then go on to succession, homeostasis, and then finally finish with pyramids. All right. The next class, Harapriya Pradhan, I think it will be on Wednesday evening. Same time, 9 p.m. All right. Okay, guys. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. If you understood, if this class was beneficial to you, may I request you, just quickly leave me a like. That will be of immense help and encouragement to me. And if you found this again useful for not just you but also for your friends, do consider sharing this with your friends too. Okay. On that note, it's a wrap from all of us here at StudyIQ English. I do hope to see many of you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for the editorial edge and the next class, lecture 4 of the Aranya series. Up until then, study well, take care, be productive, and bye.